Welcome to the Royal Academy of Music in Aarhus on this beautiful sunny day. My name is Wayne Siegel. I am a composer and I am professor of electronic music here at the Royal Academy of Music in Aarhus. And I'm going to be speaking to you today about some work I've been doing using motion capture or motion controlled technology to control sound and music. This all started quite a few years ago in the 90s when I started working with motion capture and motion control. And the reason was I was working with dancers at the time, and I was fascinated by the idea. Normally when dancers dance to music, there'll be music, sometimes a CD. If it's a choreographer that's working with dancers, they often use a CD, and the dancers dance to the music, and but the CD just goes on at its own rate, at its own pace, and the dancers have to be in the right place at the right time. And I had this idea that it would be cool if we could turn that situation around in a backwards way and allow the dancers to control the music. And I had this idea, and I just really couldn't get it out of my head, and started working with this. The technology was not so easy to deal with at that time. There were a number of people around the world that were working with this, but it wasn't like you could go into a store and buy equipment that could do this. Today we have all kinds of devices that can do this, like the Wii controller, and many different things, but at that time it was a little bit more difficult. It's not that the technology didn't exist; it did, but it was not easily available. So what we had to do, it started as a research project, and what we had to do was first find out who had been working with this kind of thing, and what kind of technology was being used. But we found there was nothing you could really buy in order to work with this. So we had to actually invent and develop a system ourselves. And this started as the Digital Dance Project in 1996, and we ended up building a system that the dancer had to wear. They were sensors that the dancer had to wear on his or her body, and it was attached to a wireless transmitter, and there was a receiver, and that was connected to the computer, so the computer was getting data from the sensors, and I could, the way that I work as a composer, I compose all kinds of music. I compose chamber music, for symphony orchestra, but I compose a lot of electronic music, and I have done so for the past, since before you were born. And I was working with electronic music at the time, and I was writing my own software for this kind of music. So I had basically written software so that my computer could invent music under the influence of the dancer's movement. Does that make any sense? So this project developed, and we built the system as part of a research project, but it actually became quite successful, and there were a number of institutions and dance companies around the world that wanted to buy this. And I think one of the problems for us was that we had to invent all of this ourselves because we couldn't buy it. So we actually did make it available to other people, so that there were a number of people around, dance companies around the world that were using this system. So I'm going to show you a little bit from Sisters.
Systems. Simple.
This project went on. The way this piece works is that all of the sound that you hear is created by the dancer's movement. It's actually quite direct, quite straightforward, and quite simple, but the thing is that there are a lot of different movements and there are a lot of different sounds, so it becomes more complicated. This project ended up, it developed and ended up becoming a dance production that was done over at this big art museum, which is right across the grass, which is called Aros, and it was a public dance production that was done so that it was called the Pandora. It was called Pandora's, the Gift of Pandora, actually. It's called in English. And it was a production that was done in a public space, so that the dancers were actually surrounded by the audience, and people could come and go as they pleased. And we used this kind of technology in different ways during the piece. But one of the things that developed from this was that a few years ago, I started working with new technology. Instead of using sensors, I started using camera technology or video. The reason was that it's much easier because the dancers don't have to wear these things. And the reason that we didn't do that earlier was that the technology was not that developed. It was, computers were not as fast as they are today, and it was more difficult to do and a little bit more risky. But today's technology, the cameras and computers are very fast, and it's possible to use that kind of technology. So I was going to show you just a little bit from this production. Okay, in a way, for me, the creative process is a little bit like making yogurt or sourdough bread. Not that I make yogurt or sourdough bread, I don't really know how. But I know that when you make yogurt, in order to make yogurt, you have to have a little bit of the old yogurt to put in with the new yogurt so that it can cultivate and become yogurt. And that's very similar to the way that I work creatively, which is different for different artists. But very often, a project that I'm working on will spill over into the next project. So that I'll take a little bit of the old project and start up a new project instead of making a clean cut and doing something completely different. And what you see in this video is a result of that. Because when I was working with dancers and working with motion tracking technology and cameras, and my test setup was this computer, which has a webcam. And so pretty much I could move my hands in front of the computer and think, okay, if a dancer did this, then how would the music or the sound react? And it was a test experimental setup so that I could change the software basically. I said, well, if they do this, oh, that's not going to work. So I could change things. And at some point when I was testing things, I stood in front of my computer, moving my hands around, and I got this idea. I said, hey, this is really fun. I could turn this into a solo piece where I could control the sound with my hands. And the other idea was that the dancers thought it was really fun too. So I also thought, well, everybody should be able to work to try this out. So two projects developed from this. And the one is what you saw here. They were dancing on this big box, basically a podium or like a little stage. And that was a sound installation that was done for a museum in a town called Siegel. And the way it's actually designed for the general public. And it's basically just a box with a big sound system inside. But there's a motion tracking camera up above that's looking down on this stage, you could see. So that when they move around on that little stage, there's sound. So that's how this this piece developed. This is what it looks like. And it was it was at a museum for about 6 months where people could just jump up on it and hop around. But the other idea was to actually do a solo piece where I used the computer more as an instrument. And that piece is okay. It's called. I'm going to show you a little bit from that in just a second. Another piece that I did was in a shopping center. It was sort of the opposite of Drowning Burning, which was the stage thing. And that was the sound system was up at a skylight, very high above. And when people walked under it, there would be sounds happening, and they were actually, the people that were walking under it were controlling the sound. So if they stopped and decided to dance a little bit or move around, they could control, do a little happening there and control the sound. And that piece was called Listen Up. I also have written a chapter in a book called The Oxford Handbook of Computer Music, which is this chapter is about dancing the music or controlling sound with motion. And the last thing I was going to tell you about is this project where I've become a performer or a conductor, where I can conduct the sounds with my hands. And this was this is another thing that came out of this working with this technology. And it was commissioned by a festival in Reykjavik in Iceland. And I think it would be fun to just show you how it works. So basically, I think you can see some of that. Basically what you see is that I have divided the screen into 12 sections. and each section is the software I've written. Each section of the screen is controlled by the activity of the movement in that section. So it's not a matter of is my hand there or is my hand not there. It's not really triggering things. It's more subtle than that. If I move a little bit, there'll be a little bit of sound. If I move a lot, then there'll be a lot of sound. And I can actually control 12 different sounds that way. Very often when people work with computers in presenting electronic music, they're sitting at a laptop typing stuff, and we call it at school, at our electronic music program, we call it home banking. Because that's what they might be doing is checking their bank account or writing an email to their mother or something. You can't really tell because the interaction between the interface between the system and what was actually coming out of it is not very clear cut. So that's one of the things that I really like about this system is that you can control it without having to touch the computer. So I did this solo piece in that way. I just start the computer, and the computer is helping me. The composition is already there. It's not a complete, total improvisation. The composition is there, and the computer is telling me where I am in the composition, but I'm actually conducting it or controlling it. And it can sound in many different ways. One of the things I've gone on to do with this piece is I created a new piece recently which uses the same technology, but it was done, it was commissioned for the Royal Library in Copenhagen. And in this huge building, there are actually 12 loudspeakers installed underneath these different balconies here. There are 12 loudspeakers in the ceilings. So I could actually stand in the middle looking out over the harbor of Copenhagen and control all these and throw sounds around in this huge building, which was great fun. I did that a couple of weeks ago, and the first piece that I just demonstrated is called Two Hands Not Clapping. And this new piece is called No Water, No Moon. And I just wanted to tell you that I will be doing Two Hands Not Clapping at a concert in Copenhagen next week on Thursday at a place called Theater Republik. So I think that's about it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.